Hey, yo, what is going on, you guys? Got a brand new episode of Buy or Bust for you guys today. We're going to be talking about Jocasta. Is this the best card of the season, or is it too niche? We're going to be talking about the good, the bad, the floor, the ceiling, key synergies, counters, as well as 3 separate decks for this card. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. So in case you guys did not know, Jocasta is a brand new Series 5 card releasing on Tuesday. That is a 3-cost, 3-powered card with the ability Activate. Immediately activate your other cards here without using up their activate abilities. This card has some crazy combo potential, not just for First Steps Invisible Woman, but of course that will be a key synergy for this card. This is what it looks like in game, and the rumor has it that not only will you be able to activate without using up an activate ability, you will be able to activate a card again, meaning that this will, even though the card's already used its activate ability, this will allow you to use that activate ability again. And that is the rumor. Until we see this actually in action, we cannot confirm that for certain. But you can at least, prior to activating one of your other cards, activate Jocasta first to get the activate to go off. But the rumor is that you might be able to do it again. If an activate's already happened, Jocasta can make the activate happen again for a card that has already been activated. Moving on to key synergies, one of the first key synergies we're going to have is First Steps Invisible Woman. If you guys have been using the Prodigy line with Invisible Woman, this is pretty much the same thing, except you don't have to stack your cards in such a way for, Prodigy to copy the Invisible Woman for Invisible Woman to get that ability to proc twice. Jocasta now does that instead. Of course, we also have Bullseye. If you want to discard more cards, you have Jocasta, so you can have Bullseye go off multiple times, go off once without burning his ability, go off twice with Jocasta, with Bullseye activating himself, or maybe Bullseye goes off once already, and then Jocasta makes it go off again. So, I feel there's a couple different ways you can kind of mess around with this. Helps with these cards, both these cards being late draws. I think Jocasta really helps with that, especially in the activate function, since that is something that activate does really lack in, and its downside is it is a bad late draw. Of course, next, I'm saying Herbie. Being able to use some of Herbie's abilities without activating Herbie, maybe you want to double Herbie's power and then save the bonus energy for a different turn, or give, your other cards plus power and save that, the other Herbie stuff for different turns. I do believe the Jocasta activate works for what currently Herbie's activate is. So if you activate Herbie and then you activate Jocasta in that order, it'll just double up what Herbie already has done. Or if you would activate Herbie and then you wait a couple turns, maybe then activate Jocasta, it should be the original Herbie activate. That is kind of where my thought process is with this. Another instance where you have to kind of see it in action. And of course, any activate card is pretty much going to be a key synergy with Jocasta, kind of like how Wong is a key synergy with pretty much any on-reveal card. It is literally the on-reveal of the on-reveal Wong, but is the activate Wong, yes, for Jocasta. It's pretty much a Wong for activates, is what I'm trying to say. Moving on to the counters, we do have Red Guardian as one of the counters for Jocasta, mainly if it's Jocasta in a lane by itself. There's going to be a lot of instances where it's not going to be in a lane by itself, so it's not going to be the main target for the Red Guardian, but still a 3 stat line for the power isn't anything crazy, so it still can be pretty, applicable for a Red Guardian target, but is it an okay, nice, safe medium there? And then Super Adaptoid. They are releasing a card the same week Jocasta comes out that counters activate cards on reveal, steal, and activate ability from another enemy card here. So that is what Super Adaptoid does. So it's a deliberate counter to Jocasta to help you target it that way in case your Red Guardian isn't going to be able to hit your Jocasta. And then, of course, Cosmic Ghost Rider. There's going to be more instances where you're playing Jocasta as one of the first cards in a lane. Cosmic Ghost Rider hits the first 2 cards in a lane. So Jocasta does get countered by Cosmic Ghost Rider. Moving on to the good. We do have... this card's going to be strong. Being able to activate a card without having to spend the activate is really solid, allowing you to either do them both on the same exact turn to get value or do them on separate terms in order to profit as well. I think of this also with something like a Jennifer Kale, getting the option to be able to get extra energy on the next turn, and then being able to do that again on a later turn, I think is going to be pretty solid as well. It's a 3-cost as well, so it's pretty easy to play out. You have to get value, of course, playing this out on... You can play this out on 3, you can play this out on 4, or you can play this out on 5, because you can actually use this activate on turn 6 and be able to get value there, which is pretty solid as well. Kind of like, your First Steps Invisible Woman is good to play out on 3, 4, 5. Same with Bullseye, 3, 4, 5. Being able to use this, it's not a activate ability you have to use prior to the next turn, which kind of helps, boost this card's value too as well, which is really nice. And then, it's a decent base power like we're talking about to avoid Red Guardian. And they had to add a counter card to the release of Jocasta because I believe they also assumed that this card is going to be strong. So I think that is actually a good for this card. When we do talk about the bad for this card, the cards do have to be in the same lane as Jocasta in order to get the value. So in order to get the activate for her activate to work, it's not a global activate. It is a single lane activate. It has to be activated. Jocasta has to be activated in order for this to work. It can't be, same play. Like, she can't be played on the same turn and activated on the same turn, so you have to keep that in mind as it is an activate card. It could be predictable lanes, too, because, you have to play the cards onto Jocasta's lane. Your opponents can really assume what's going to be going down in that lane and maybe have cards to be able to counteract what you're trying to do. And then you might actually have to use this a little bit early, depending on what your pocket meta is or how the meta is shaping up. Potentially using your Jocasta early to avoid getting hit by a Cosmic Ghost Rider or potentially even a Super Adaptoid. I think we might see a more influx of Cosmic Ghost Rider this next week as we do see more activates probably running around because it's Jocasta's week. So just keep that in mind when you are playing this card. You may have to use it earlier opposed to saving it for later. It just really depends on your matchups. Moving on to the floor and the ceiling for this card. The floor for this card is that this is a late draw and you can't be able to use her ability because she's an activate. Or you don't have any other activates in that lane or activates that you've drawn to be able to get any value from Jocasta. That's the low for it. The high for this is you play this out on curve or maybe even a little bit later and you're able to have at least one activate in the same lane to be able to get Jocasta to go off. If you have multiple activates, like you'll see in this next list, there's also instances where you can kind of just go crazy. And with this being the next list, it is going to be, of course, the Invisible Woman First Steps, end of turn, and we're putting Fantasticard back in this list. I know some people have taken it out of this list. I think having this to be able to get +4 essentially to some of your other end of turn cards is really nice because Fantastic Card goes +2 originally, and then with Jocasta you can make that go off again, so you could stack First Steps, Invisible Woman, Fantastic Card, and Jocasta. I mean, that is 3 activates in one lane, but that allows you to spread so much power across the board to get some better First Steps thing value, which honestly you could just play the thing into that lane as well in order to kind of profit and be able to get extra value. With this instance, of course, the thing goes to 10 power from Fantasticard, and then it hits a card, and then it goes off twice, or no, it goes to 10 power, and then Invisible Woman makes it, go off twice, so it gets another +2 at the end of turn, so it goes to a 5/12, hits a card, and then goes to a 5/14. I think 5/14 sounds pretty good. I mean, Red Skull's pretty good at a 5/14, and his downside is it gives your opponents power, whereas the thing's downside is to be able to get the extra part of his ability, you have to just, fill the lane. You have Kate Bishop to be able to get some of that Athena value. You also have Surge in order to be able to cheat out potentially some of these cards. Stardust, Juggernaut, Hydra Bob, Black Cat, couple cards that just have regular, just good base power. I think this card, and this may not be the exact iteration of this deck you're going to be seeing, but there's going to be a lot of end turn First Steps, Invisible Woman this next week. I think that's just without a doubt, which is why I also think maybe some Toxic Darkhawk. Guys, Black Widow is an activate card. So Jocasta can make Black Widow go off twice. So don't be surprised if you do see a good bit of Darkhawk this next week, which is going to be very unfortunate. I don't know if this is the set Darkhawk deck. This is kind of just what I was messing with. Having 2 different activates for Jocasta with Herbie and Black Widow was kind of my thought process. I do think Black Widow and Jocasta can potentially be an issue here in the future, because what you're going to do is you're going to play Jocasta on 3. You're going to play Black Widow on 4, but you're going to activate Jocasta after you played Black Widow, so she goes off on turn 4. So turn 5, your opponent can draw a card. And then you're going to activate the Black Widow on turn 5. And your opponent doesn't draw a card on turn 5 and does not draw a card on turn 6. So your Darkhawk is huge, and your opponent has to mess with the cards they have in their hand currently. I think this is going to be one of the other more toxic versions. This next week, I would not be surprised if we do see something with Black Widow and Jocasta. So I'm letting you guys know ahead of time, this is going to be disgusting. So just keep that in mind. It might be a pretty annoying week for that. But let's move on to a more fun deck, potentially. Maybe also toxic. But Colleen Wing me see changes. Colleen Wing on Snap.fan is not updated correctly. She is a 2-3. Colleen Wing got changed in the OTA to a 2-3, so bear with me. This is a Cerebro 3 discard deck using Bullseye and Omega Sentinel. So you have Bullseye to potentially go off twice, afflicting multiple cards for your opponents with Jocasta and himself going off. So that's a lot of power getting negated across the board. And then your card's also getting buffed by Cerebro. You have Swarms in your hand and Swarms you can play out. You also have Killmonger for some tech. You can maybe change Killmonger for a different, maybe it's like a Cosmo instead to protect your Jocasta Bullseye lane maybe. Or to protect your Cerebro, even probably more so to protect your Cerebro. You're playing a Cosmo instead of Killmonger. It just kind of depends on what your meta's looking like. I'm also thinking Killmonger for opponents going to be playing more Sunspot, some Hydra Bob, playing some Black Cat for that end of turn deck we have with First Steps Invisible Woman. That's why I have Killmonger instead. You, of course, also have Moon Knight. Moon Knight hitting these Swarms. I mean, it can also hit your Colleen, your Ravonna, and your Omega Sentinel, so you're playing this out a little sparingly, or you're kind of trying to be a little smart with what you're doing there. Of course, Ravonna working with Cerebro and Mystique is the main line there. But I think it'll be fun to play some good old Cerebro 3 discard. I think it's really cool that you're actually able to do that now with Colleen Wing, which is pretty nice. Of course, like I said, it's on screen. She's wrong because on Snap.fan, they still have theirs on 4 cost, and I build my decks on Snap.fan, which all the decks are down in the description below. If you guys did not know that, decks are in the description below. But yeah, that is the third and final deck, which moves us over to my thoughts on Jocasta. Moving on to my ratings for Jocasta, I think Jocasta is incredibly strong. We have her at 5 stars. I know we had Warlock at 4 stars. I still think Warlock is good. He's probably more 3 stars than 4 stars, if we're being honest. But I do think this card is incredibly strong, and it's going to be a meta staple, at least for a good minute, at least for this week. It's going to be very solid flexibility-wise. I think there's a good array of decks. There's a variety of different activate cards. Of course, not all activate cards are going to be played with Jocasta, but there's going to be a variety of activate cards that do get played with her in general. Maybe we'll get Hellcow back. Maybe Betsy will get some value too, and you'll see some Hellcow in discard again. Maybe, probably not. But that is an option that people are going to be able to mess around with. Of course, Stardust is everywhere too, so we're seeing a lot of that. I don't necessarily think this card will get adjusted. If she does, maybe she goes to a 3-2, so she is more targetable by a Red Guardian or something. But I don't really see that happening just because of still how kind of like narrow maybe some of the activates are, whereas like the decks themselves that these all can fit in is why I have the flexibility up. So I think in general, she's going to be really, really solid, which is I think she is a must-have. She is a buy. Like, I think you guys should totally go after this card. But as always, I do want to note that you guys should only be spending your resources on cards you truly want to play and you will truly enjoy. Get them for decks that you think you're going to want to play. Wait a couple days and see what creators make for these style cards before you're like, yo, I need to get this card for sure. I know I want it. Like, don't spend resources that you don't really want to, you spend on, right? Because, like, at the end of the day, like, you don't know, like, it's just so hard to get resources, guys. And, like, we don't know necessarily if these cards are going to work out the way that they're intended to work out. We are theory crafting. We haven't been able to test these cards. We only have, the dev video to be able to kind of like see what these cards kind of look like in action. So we don't necessarily know if these are going to be absolutely amazing for sure. So be sparingly with your resource. We also have a new season starting, after this next week with the zombie season. We're going to have hordes, a whole new mechanic coming to Snap. So like there's a different variety of ways, or there's a bunch of just different things coming to Snap. So, like, I would just be smart with how you spend your resources and maybe not just pour all the way in unless it's what you really want to do. Because also, at the end of the day, we're playing a video game, guys. And, like, we want to have joy. We want to experience joy. We want to play what's fun. We want to, do what we want to do. Like, if you want to get this card and you want to spend all your resources on maybe cards from the past, like, do it because that's how you're going to find joy and have the most fun. So, just kind of keep that in mind when it comes to, buying these new cards and, like, we're theory crafters. When we make these type of videos, we're theory crafting. We don't know exactly how the meta is going to shape up. We just had an OTA this past week. The OTA hasn't fully settled necessarily before this card comes out. It takes a minute for it to kind of settle, so just kind of like keep that in mind when it comes to this. But yeah, honestly, thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know down below. Are you guys going to be getting Jocasta or not? And then, yeah, it's been real. God bless, and Tucker out.